David, a boy with a heart for God. It was a beautiful afternoon when Angelica and her friends were playing Heroes of Faith.
I will be King Saul.
And I'll be the giant Goliath. He's bigger and stronger than the king.
Did you know that David was a shepherd boy who defeated that giant?
But Goliath was much bigger and stronger than David. How could David defeat him?
David didn't defeat Goliath by his physical strength. He defeated Goliath by his faith in God. David knew that God was with him, and that gave him the strength and courage to defeat Goliath. Let me tell you the whole story. Once upon a time in Israel, there lived a young shepherd boy who, despite his young age, was a true worshiper of God. He was also obedient and loved God very much. David was very brave because he trusted that God would always take care of him. It was so that if a bear or a lion wanted to attack the sheep, David was filled with courage by his trust in God and defended his sheep. For all these virtues, God had something special prepared for him, since he would be the next king of Israel. One day the prophet Samuel was sad because the current king did not obey or follow God, and for that reason he was rejected. At that moment, God said to Samuel,
"How long will you stay crying for Saul, if I have already rejected him as king of Israel? Better fill your horn with oil and set out. I will send you to Bethlehem, to the house of Jesse, for I have chosen one of his sons as king of Israel."
Samuel set out to the house of Jesse, just as God commanded him, to find and anoint with oil who would be the next king of Israel.
What is anointing?
Anointing is used to prepare someone for a special purpose. For example, priests are anointed with oil so that they can serve God. Upon arriving at the house, he invited him along with his sons to worship God. Samuel fixed his eyes on the eldest son. Surely this is the anointed of the Lord. But God said to Samuel,
"Do not be impressed by his appearance or stature, for I have rejected him. People look at appearances, but I look at the heart."
Then Jesse presented the rest of his sons, but Samuel replied to each one,
God has not chosen any of them.
The smallest one remains, but he is taking care of the sheep.
Send for him, that we cannot continue until he arrives.
When David arrived, God said to Samuel,
This is, "Rise up and anoint him."
Samuel took the horn of oil and anointed the young man in the presence of his brothers. Then the Spirit of God came with power upon the young man, and from that day on he was with him. Shortly after David was selected by God to be the future king, terrible things were happening in the tent of the current King Saul. God had turned away from Saul for his disobedience, and evil spirits tormented the king. But since David knew how to play the harp, he was called to calm the King Saul's torment with his music. David played the harp and sang to God, that bothered the evil spirits and fled from the place. Some time later, the people of Israel were at war with the Philistines, who were a people who did not love God. Among their soldiers was a giant whom everyone feared for his great size and strength. One day, while David was taking food to his brothers who were fighting in the war, he heard about the giant, and he became very upset to know that an enemy was terrorizing the army of God. David learned that there was a reward for whoever defeated the giant. The brave man who achieves this feat will marry the king's daughter. David without hesitation went to the king, offering to face the giant. The king offered him his armor, but it was too big and heavy for David. However, that was not an impediment for him, since David trusted in God. Just as God helped him to defeat the bears and lions that bothered his sheep, so God will give. David picked up some stones to use with his sling, and he presented himself before the Philistine army. At that moment, the giant named Goliath came out. He mocked David when he saw that he was a boy and that he only had stones and a stick to face him.
You come against me with sword, spear, and javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. Today, the Lord will deliver you into my hands.
God filled David with courage, and he struck down the giant by throwing a stone with God's help. When the Philistines saw that their champion had been defeated by a boy, they all ran away, and the Israelites won the war. They lifted David up in their arms as a sign of victory. Returning to Angelica and her friends. David did not defeat Goliath by his physical strength, he defeated Goliath by his faith in God. David knew that God was with him, and that gave him the strength and courage to defeat Goliath.
That was an incredible story. It makes me think that I can do great things, too, if I have faith in God.
That's right, we can all do great things if we have faith in God. The story of David and Goliath is an inspiring story that teaches us that faith in God can overcome any obstacle. When we have faith in God, we can face any challenge with confidence and courage.